quorum so we can do our business. First we have our housekeeping. Would someone make a motion to suspend the rules to allow the committee to meet, participate remotely due to?
I move suspension of the rules.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Okay, and I guess we do a roll call for that.
Chair Ravel,
Aye.
Councilmember Newsmode,
Aye.
Lauren Berlin,
Aye.
Hugo Rodriguez,
Aye.
and Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Motion passes.
And tonight, normally we do our public comment at the end of the meeting, but we thought we would do it this evening at the beginning of the meeting, since there are some issues of, funding decisions that this committee is going to be discussing, and we thought there might be comments from members of the public about some of those issues. So, Marian, I'm going to turn it over to you to call on people who want to offer public comment.
Sure. I will start by reading the list of attendees as we have implemented as per public suggestion. So tonight in the attendees, we have Betty Bogg, Adina Keeling, Jennifer Feuer-Crystal, Jody Wickersheimer, Jonique Smith, Julissa Flores, Liz Novak, Monique Parsons, Nia Tavularis, Nicole Woodward, and Sue Lowback. As far as public comment, it looks like we only have one person looking to make public comment, and that would be Betty Bogg.
Councilmember Burns just texted me that he is going to be joining shortly.
Okay, great.
Okay. And I'm going to allow Betty Bogg to talk. She should be able to join right now.
All right. Welcome, Betty.
Thank you, everyone. Good evening, committee members. My name is Betty Bogg, and most of you know me. I am the Executive Director of Connections for the Homeless. I'm coming to you tonight because I'm aware of mistruths about the work of Connections that are being asserted in public meetings, such as this one. I've been counseled not to be overly defensive, but I need to address these untruths as a steward of the agency, its reputation, and the investments we receive from our community partners, the City of Evanston, our faith-based friends, our participants who turn to us when they have nowhere else to go, and our staff who are truly the unsung heroes of this work, even before the pandemic started. We're in conversations to purchase the Margarita Inn. Such negotiations are sensitive, and therefore I'm limited on what I can say. What I can address is the misperception that a lack of oversight has led to increased crime and the false claim that we do not provide comprehensive wraparound services for our participants. First, opponents are falsely claiming a huge uptick in crime at the Margarita. Connections tracks all incidents that occur at our sites. We're in the process of analyzing this data, but I can share with you that from January 1st, 2022 until today, April 19th, our records show only 2 incidents requiring a police response. One was a brief misunderstanding between roommates that was peacefully resolved with no charges filed. And the second was an incident in which our staff called for assistance when a non-resident was seeking access to the property and refused to leave. We hope to compare our reports to Evanston police reports. However, it's been difficult for us to obtain detailed information from the department. We do know that about 1/3 of the reported engagement with police has been through self-directed patrols from the police and not through calls for service. Our top priority is the safety and well-being of our entire community, including our participants and staff. Our senior staff meets bi-weekly with the City of Evanston staff members, including members of the police department. In those meetings, we address any matters that require our attention, like people living on the street who might need our services, or concerns about people living at the Margarita. Officers have not brought any incidents related to the Margarita residents to my attention since May of 2021. The other disheartening statements I hear are that we lack wraparound services for our participants at the Margarita. In fact, we provide rich wraparound services through professionally licensed staff, trained residential workers, and partnerships with multiple community providers. In addition to case management, Our services include on-site physical and mental health care via licensed nursing staff and a mental health professional who provides individual and group therapy. We have substance use disorder support, employment counseling, and many additional supportive services. As always, I welcome the opportunity to discuss Connections work at any time with any community member. Thank you.
Thank you. And Marion, has anybody else raised their hand yet? Okay. Councilmember Newsma. And you're muted.
That was a misclick. I was looking to give Betty a thumbs up.
Oh, okay. All
Thumbs up,
right.
Betty.
Yeah, great. Okay. Well, then let's move on with our agenda. And the next item is another housekeeping type item. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes of our meeting of March 15th, 2022?
So move.
And a second?
I second.
Okay. Could we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Chair Ravel,
Aye.
Councilmember Newsma,
Aye.
Lauren Berlin,
Aye.
Hugo Rodriguez,
Abstain.
and Councilmember Reed.
Devon, you're muted.
Oh.
We have the votes anyway.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's consider this three votes to approve, and that's sufficient. Okay,
Motion passes.
what was that?
Motion passes.
Thank you. So let's move on to our main items. We have some very important items to discuss at our meeting this evening. And the first is the McGaw YMCA Men's Residence renovation, a funding request. And to get us started, I guess I do need a committee member to make a motion that we consider and recommend $3 million in funding for this renovation. Would someone make that motion, please?
I motion that we consider a $3 million funding to the McGaw YMCA.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Okay, all right. So now I think we're ready to hear from our friends from the McGaw YMCA.
Yes.
Or Sarah, do you want to
Yeah,
introduce?
No,
Okay,
I just want to introduce who we have here with us.
okay.
We have Monique Parsons, and Monique gave us a part of what the information that we're going to talk about tonight last fall, to really start sharing what the needs of the men's residents are, and how they were looking to address and change the facility, but also how they are changing their programming from its many, many years of history of providing housing. In addition, we have Nicole Woodard here and Jody Wickersheimer. Nicole is the Chief Operating Officer and Jody is the Chief Development Officer. And I think they're on to answer questions if need be. And so Monique, you are on. I don't want to go through the whole memo because you have such a thorough presentation. I think it would be completely unnecessary. So,
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you. And I want to apologize. There is a horn going off, a car horn going off in the background. If you can hear that, that's what that is. So hello, everyone, and thank you for having me and my colleagues from McGaw YMCA join the committee's work tonight. Again, I'm Monique Parsons. I'm the president and CEO of McGaw YMCA. I've been with McGaw for 17 years, and I've served as CEO since 2018. I'm joined tonight by Nicole Woodard, who is my Chief Operating Officer, and Jody Wickensheimer, my Chief Development Officer, both who have been with the Y for over 5 years. I'm planning on sharing a few key highlights in the next eight slides, and then open the floor up for a conversation with this committee. Next slide, please. Thank you. The National Y movement was founded in the 1800s as boarding houses for men. In Evanston, we never wavered in our commitment to housing men when they were at moments of their transition. But what they needed and how we responded as an organization has certainly changed. In the 1980s and the 90s, the residence was a tenant and landlord relationship. Early 2000, more policies and systems were put in place for our resident members. We introduced the first framework for case management services. Over the last 20 years, the size and expertise of our staff expanded to meet the needs of our resident members to create a true program. We are committed to our role to provide bridge housing and support services with a focus on getting men permanent housing after 1000 Grove. In short, we want to make sure that we can help our resident members get to their address after they leave Bogg. Since October 2021, 12 resident members have already moved to permit market rate apartments. This strongly aligns with the City of Evanston's philosophy and allocation of its resources, structures, and approach. Next slide, please. The Residence Department has 5 full-time staff members who engage in direct case management services with each resident member. The social services are formal and structured, but also embedded in the informal interactions in the lobby, the hallways, and gathering spaces throughout the Y. In addition to the direct service staff, the membership and building service teams are the supporting cast in the care for our resident members. In essence, the resident members have 10 to 15 people engaging with them and looking out for them each day, in addition to the community that is built among them. I appreciate the statement in Marian Johnson's memo to the committee, quote, "The SRO model also provides for additional level of interactions with staff and other residents, which contributes to the success of the program. They are a community within a community where services meet them literally at their front door. We are proud to serve the members of our community who need us the most with housing and services. And we now have a vision for the future of the ways that we can serve them better." Next slide, please. So we want to give our residents a new welcome home. We've learned lessons during COVID about how to organize the spaces so it provides added safety and updates reflect the contemporary standard of living. A roof over their head they can afford, and case management just isn't enough. Our commitment to equity is on display with this project and drove specific elements of our design. For example, congregate spaces need more square footage. 4 efficiency units will support short-term rentals ranging from emergency housing to unexpected medical circumstances. Bathrooms, kitchenettes, and laundry facilities on each floor that will allow for more distance in space and less crossover between individuals. Showers providing privacy with an individual changing room. The result of these needs will create a reduction in total SRO units from 172 to 156. A new private entrance, an additional 19,000 square feet of gathering and program space. Next slide. We are so grateful to the City of Evanston for the zoning variance we received in February of this year. That was actually the linchpin for the project so we could confirm the scope and submit this funding request. The staff memo highlights the constraints of our funding sources and lean operational model. We have experience with large capital projects and getting them done as good neighbors. In the last 30 years, we have added a new pool, a new gymnasium, and renovated our youth lobby for Metamedia. That collective experience sets us up for success with this renovation. Next slide, please. So this is the 5th floor of the men's residence program. with 58 of the 156 SRO rooms. The impact of the $3 million is real in physical space and the hundreds of men who will live here over the next 100 years. We make a parallel to the $2 million investment this committee made in 2020 to the Anne Rainey Apartments for 60 units. As with this project, we are also committed to the 30-year affordability period for all 156 units. And as always, we have a sense of urgency to make this happen. Next slide, please. So we are having conversations with our lead donors and with a target to secure funding this year and break ground in June 2023. The endorsement of this committee is timely for the ARPA allocations, but will also leverage the confidence of our community to make their commitments to this project too. The men's residence renovation project will have a generational impact and be remembered as a bright spot coming out of the struggle over the last 2 years. So thank you for your time. I'd like to answer any questions you may have. Thank you again.
Chair Yvel, I think you're on mute.
Thank you. I was just thanking Monique for her presentation. It's a very exciting project. So let me turn it over to committee members for questions and comments. Yeah, Lauren.
Hi, I'm Lauren Berlin. I don't think we've met before. Thank you for your presentation. It is exciting. At the risk of asking a question very far in the future, more just out of curiosity than anything else, you mentioned that you're committed to preserving the affordability of the units for 30 years. I'm just curious what happens after 30 years. I mean, I imagine that indefinitely they would continue to be SRO units dedicated to this purpose.
They definitely will be. So they have always been McGaw YMCA, as well as the Emerson YMCA, when it was created and built, was built for housing. And McGaw YMCA has never steered away from that. So our commitment is to make sure that we support the community that we serve. And so that affordability will go on indefinitely. I was trying to give us a,
yeah, I think I was interpreting it the wrong way.
Right?
I know. I was like, what happens after 30 years?
But we have been here since, for over 130 years with housing.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we have not gone out of business in providing affordable housing. So because of that, we will stay committed as long as we need to this community to make sure that we have a place that our men can live.
Thank you.
Okay, Ugo.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions, and the first one is, I'm curious about the rate of occupancy over the years. What is historically the case at McGaw?
Sure, I'm gonna let my chief operating officer, who's on the front line literally, to respond to that question. Nicole?
Yeah, hello, thank you for having us. Happily, so, I wanna say in this immediate past during COVID, we guaranteed that men would be housed, right? No matter unemployment, and all that has happened. And so we have 156 men living at the Y. But we typically plan for about 94 to 95% occupancy. And that is our, is standard. Often it's higher than that, but it is always in the mid to high 90s.
And a follow-up to that is there'll be a shortage of 14 units once you do the renovation. How do you think that will impact the residents? Because it sounds to me like you'll be at 100% or 110% or 105% occupancy once you don't have those 14 units. And kind of a branch to that is, I'm sure you have, but I just wanted to hear it from you, is the consideration that COVID restrictions, knocking on wood, they won't be with us for a long time. So the social distancing that you're planning might be obsolete in a few years, or in maybe short. I don't know. I don't know what other things could be, but that we don't have a crystal ball, and I know you don't either. So just wanted to put it out there.
So let us hope that that is the case. We don't anticipate that being the case, given what we're learning about variants and the way this is moving forward. But we are renovating our spaces to a high degree. They are flexible enough. Again, we would love to go out of business. We're not going to go out of business, right? What we have done intentionally is to not fill rooms as men have moved out, so that we're not displacing any men through this process of the renovation. And so we're not adding spaces, because we want to move forward and make sure that everyone comes back to their home.
And when you say come back to their, I'm sorry, Ms. Wood.
Come back to their
to their own home, or to
the
McGraw?
Y. The Y is their home right now. So
Okay.
we call it, we talk about it like that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And I think the thing about preparing the living spaces so that they are more livable. As I mentioned, this building is over 130 years old, and our rooms have not been updated in over 130 years. And our men deserve an updated living space. And so we also have men that are aging in place that need more accommodations as they transition out, right? And we don't transition men out until we know they have a better place to go, a place that's convenient and prepared to receive them. But while they're with us, we have to make sure that they have all the accommodations they need to live a well life. And so the efficiencies are something new that we would like to add, because we did discover through COVID taught us all a lot, that our men needed more space, right? And so we're trying to make those accommodations while still being flexible with the living environment.
I think the other place that we've lost rooms, right, is to provide privacy in the bathroom.
Right.
We think that's an important part of living with dignity.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, some of the timeless designs are, regardless of COVID or any other communicable disease, showers that are individual versus a room. To be very specific, right now it's a shower room, one room for a group of men to shower together. And then even in the bathrooms, sinks are on one side and the toilet areas are on another. So it's just it takes more space, but those kind of design changes are going to be timeless and again, provide that privacy and dignity even outside times of illness.
And it's important to mention that these elements were given to us by the men that currently live here, right? And some of it, we thought was basic. They deserve this and more, but these were things that they suggested, and so we're trying to support that.
Okay. Councilmember Newsmode, you have a comment.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation, Monique. Good to see you again. I'm excited about this project. The McGaw Y has been here in the 4th Ward a lot longer than I have, longer than anyone here has been around for sure. So I'm looking forward to helping this project advance. Since we're talking about ARPA money, let's talk about funding. And Monique, if you could talk to the sources and uses of the funding. How much are you intending to raise for this project, and how is that money all going to be used, and how does the city's proposed contribution fit in?
Jody, go ahead.
So the whole project is a $12.6 million project. And we really heard the kind of call to action with the ARPA funding that projects needed to be kind of like a one-time investment, promote the sustainability. And we also wanted to make sure that the budget for this project was comprehensive. So it includes the relocation for our gentlemen during this time, and that is really closing the gap between housing that they will still pay during this time and then what is market rent, in addition to an endowment that will be used for future maintenance, as well as fee assistance, right? Because we want to make sure that while the operational model is very lean, that it doesn't create this ongoing need for us to do a capital campaign in another 50, 75, 92 years. The majority of the construction costs are really what take up the budget, and that's about $6.9 million. We have been very fortunate to have a lead donor who has really put forward the first $1.6 million of this project to get us to the specifics of the scope of this project. So yeah, new furnishings, endowment, relocation expenses, construction, it is lean and meaningful.
And how did you get to the $3 million number?
Part of that was through some conversation with city staff, and also looking at the investment that this group has done in other housing projects. The most recent investment, and we referenced this in our memo as well as in Monique's presentation, was around the Anne Rainey apartments. That $2 million translates to roughly $33,000 a unit. Our $3 million investment translates to roughly $19,000 a unit. So we are making a bigger impact, as well as this is bridge housing. So we will serve more than 156 men each year. So that $3 million, we're expecting it to go farther in specific units, as well as those units over time. And this long-term commitment to, we didn't want to engage in a contract or a commitment with the city in perpetuity, but it will be in perpetuity. We have always been affordable.
Is this the first time we've heard the $3 million number? I know we've had conversations about this before. I'd have to dig back into my notes to see exactly if we had even talked about a dollar amount. And I guess I'm a little bit on 3 million because it sounds new to me. And it's some quick math. It's about 24% of the total project, which is on a percentage basis kind of higher than our rule of thumb.
So I've had several conversations with council members. I think we talked a couple of times.
Yeah.
And so this number is not brand new.
Did we say 3 when we talked?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And we've talked to, as Jody mentioned, city staff before. The other thing that will go on forever is that we will continue to be partners with the city. I mean, we are in partnership. We have, this is probably our first time coming to the city for a number like this. I mean, we have maintained our facility in terms of adding to it and responding to the needs of the community. And this is one area where we intersect. I mean, this is what we do. Many of the men that live here work in our community. They receive services from the city. There was a time when city staff placed men in our facility. So this has been a long-term relationship, and I just think it's very consistent to what the city is trying to do and how we can continue to provide that service. So, yeah.
And Sarah, we're talking, which ARPA category are we talking? If we could just clarify that.
We keep changing those darn categories, don't we? It makes it very difficult. But we've talked about, at one point, we had 4 million for housing. And then we had additional money for our impacted, disparately impacted communities. So quite frankly, it's somewhat, what we use in which category is somewhat flexible, since things like the one-stop shop that we're talking about, which I think we're all very committed to, is going to be focused on those areas of greatest need, our lower income neighborhoods, and would likely come out of that bucket. We're actually looking at using the, in addition, I've always said the 2 census tracts that were NSP2 census tracts, but also the Biden administration did an analysis and of areas that they see as geographic areas of disinvestment or that need more investment due to their current status. And they included census tract 8096, which is right below 8092, which was when we were coming out of the worst of the mortgage foreclosure crisis, and we applied with Community Partners for Affordable Housing to the Attorney General's office for some money that they were issuing for, to again purchase and renovate vacant and foreclosed homes. That census tract was one of the ones of that focus, because we saw the initial challenges were in those 2 census tracts, but then there was sort of a rolling down to the, so there's some real, I see that particular project, the one-stop shop, coming out of the, as I say, the stuff is the funding that's the geographic focus.
Is there any other potential source of funding for the Y project, or are we talking just ARPA here?
Well, we talked about a number of funds. It's possible that we could use some money from the Affordable Housing Fund, but I'll be frank, we have more other flexible uses and no deadline to spend that. So one of the things that we can consider, and that we can do something like what we did in with the Ann Rainey Apartments. In that case, we had this great idea. I wanted to use $500,000 of home funding and then $1.5 million from the Affordable Housing Fund, but we hadn't gotten our next year of home funding yet. So we didn't really know how much we were going to get and everything like that. So we basically made a commitment and said it will come from one of these sources. So it's, and some of our other areas have other possible funding sources, like the 5/5 TIF is going to start kicking in at some point. And so we have more resources in other areas. So I'm not particularly, I think one of the important things is if we had a more consistent source of money for the Affordable Housing Fund, I would be more interested in maybe splitting that, but that's the challenge
So
here.
CDBG money is not
CDBG, I don't want to put in, and I'll tell you why. Because then it triggers Davis-Bacon, and it puts a lot of red tape on a project that I think wouldn't really make sense. And just to make the committee aware, not all of
seems like there's already a lot of red tape.
Yeah, there's plenty of red tape on all federal, but it's even more intense. One of the things that is important to think about is SROs aren't really a very easily fundable form of housing because, you know, let's face it, in this country, we've kind of pushed them out of existence in many places. And the Y did apply to the Illinois Housing Development Authority 5 years ago about, I think it was, for low-income housing tax credits. And Mayor Haggerty wrote a letter of support. I wrote a letter of support. A lot of us were saying this is a very important facility and housing, part of our housing program, you know, our affordable housing, even though they're not full housing units, which is really what many housing funding, the focus of housing funding, let's put it that way. And LIHTC said, I mean, IDA said, no, we're not going to give you LIHTC. So a lot of the other funding sources that are generally used for large projects, whether it is new construction or even rehab or acquisition and rehab, like the tax credit programs, they're just not open to funding it, which creates a problem. Another thing I wanted to point out about the WISE operating budget, and they did share it with us, and we didn't get it. Oh yeah, we do. We have it in the packet. It's at the last page of that. And one of the things that you'll see is it's a blended. You know, you have approximately a little over $1 million of money coming in, earned income from the rent or the fees that the residents pay. But when you look at what the Y is committing to providing, when you look at the scale of the wages and salaries for the people, as Monique said, they have 5 people who are devoted to the resident staff. It's almost like creating really, it's providing wraparound services and creating a shelter, not a transitional housing, shall we say, with really strong supports that they are not getting any other source of funding from. That comes out of their own resources. So it's a little bit of a different financial equation from that standpoint too. They're making a pretty major commitment to services as a part of this agreement.
And speaking of financial equations, since we're talking ARPA money here, we have a rubric or an algorithm for, for quantifying proposals and comparing proposals. Have we run this through the rubric?
Not formally, but it meets. One of the key things that we heard from the community overall was affordable housing, affordable housing, affordable housing, affordable housing.
Yeah, this definitely passes this
So
for sure. I'm not.
Yes. So, you know, if you look at what we have as some of the percentages of total costs, it's higher than, as you noted, higher than some of our rubrics. We don't really have one for housing quite the same way that we have for economic development, because quite frankly, we have to be flexible. A lot of times we're more the gap fillers than the primary sources. And in this case, it's a different role for us. We're being asked to be more of a primary source given the lack of other primary sources.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm happy to fund this at, we can finalize the number as we discuss this, but in anticipation of other worthy projects being presented to us, I want to talk about our approach to allocating our ARPA bucket. And are we gonna dole this money out kind of on a first come first serve basis, or are we gonna wait until we have a bunch of applications or several applications and then, then see what makes sense? Since there is inevitably probably not enough money to go around to give everybody everything that they want.
I think a key thing is we have I don't think that, especially with housing, we can really hold, and we're not doing a directly competitive. I think we have to look very much at which projects are at a stage where they are implementable within the ARPA timeframe.
Yeah, and my intent here is not to pit very worthy projects head to head in a competition, but
Right.
I would prefer to see what the whole playing field looks like before we decide how we're going to move through it.
Mhm. Well, we are waiting. What? Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
I was just
We
going to
are-
end my comments there. I see that Councilmember Burns has. As well.
Should we go to Councilmember Burns or Sarah?
Absolutely.
Okay, Councilmember Burns.
Thank you. Yeah, one, I would, and thank you, Monique. And I came on late, so I think there are other representatives from the YMCA on the call. So welcome. I want to welcome the whole YMCA team. As I've noted before, I'm a product of YMCA programming. Went to what we call the small YMCA and the big YMCA. Went to both programs, Camp Echo Kids. So thanks for all you do and for joining the call this evening. Sarah, just to you, I would love to better understand, to have a breakdown of what those, the red tape differences between Davis-Bacon and the, I don't know what we're comparing that to, but the ARPA guidelines or the ARPA red tape, what is, just side by side, Davis-Bacon versus ARPA guidelines. Let's get a sense of, or CDBG. I can't remember if we were comparing to Davis-Bacon and something with CDBG. No, CDBG was tied to Davis-Bacon. So I guess Davis-Bacon versus the ARPA guidelines or the ARPA red tape. I'd like either in an email to all the committee members, or it could be in the next meeting in the packet, but I'd like to know what those differences are. I think understanding those differences and really having all of us take a look at it to see if there's any opportunities there is important. So I would like to see that. And from what I remember, the rubric that we came up with was intended to be broad enough to work with all of our committees, and we left how each area or group, or how each category would be weighed up to each individual committee. And so the Economic Development Committee would weigh and score their rubric differently than this committee would. But it's my understanding that we still are supposed to work off of the rubric that we adopted as a full council. And so I would, obviously full transparency, there are at least 3 or 4 different proposals that did not have to go through that process. And that's why I, throughout the whole process, was hesitant about approving those processes. When it seemed like it was inevitable, I said, look, we need to at least adopt something. And we did. We adopted the rubric that I just mentioned, as well as a kind of preliminary plan. But certainly moving forward, if anyone is going to abide by that process, we have to start now and remain consistent throughout the remainder of this process. And so I would like to see not only this go through through that process, but any other proposal, at this point. And I'm supportive of what is trying to be done, and I think they will receive a high score because of the work that they're doing. But I think, again, to remain consistent at this point, we need everybody to go through that process.
Mhm.
So Councilmember Burns, when you say you'd like all the proposals to go through this process, how do you see that working for this proposal in particular? What is the next
I don't know if you can pull it up for everybody. I again was not as prepared for this meeting as I would like to be, or I would have had it up, so I apologize. But if you pull up the plan that we passed, there was a rubric in there, and that's what I think we need to go in the point was for us to, as a committee, develop how we would weigh each category. So there was a category that looked at how much funding an applicant had, right? What are your different sources of funding, and what percentage, I would imagine, does the city make up of that, and how many other partners, sources of funds do you have? And obviously, I think the point in that is the more funding you have from other partners, the higher the score is, right? Like, that's up for us to come up with how we want to score and weigh those things. But I do think we need to follow the adopted, rubric and process for ARPA requests.
I'm working on pulling that up, and of course, you'd think I'd remember the exact council meeting that we took it to, but I don't. So I, of course, have chosen all the wrong ones.
Late March, I believe, wasn't it?
Yeah. Actually, I think that what I did was I picked up the wrong one because I went to the one that was the first one, not the approved one. I went to the 228, and I think it was the 328. So I'm now moving to that one.
And but unfortunately, our committee members who aren't on the council probably don't have this, because this is that big ARPA packet, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It is not the 20. No, it's not that one.
Well, but it
business.
seems that we're probably not prepared to go through tonight, but maybe we could do it at our next meeting, and then the rest of the committee would have a copy of this rubric.
Absolutely.
To work with.
It wasn't 328.
Lauren, is that what you were going to be asking about, or?
The one thing I was just going to say, and as you just said, I was not part of figuring out that rubric, but I mean, my timing may be off on this, so correct me please if I'm wrong, but my sense is that there are some projects we've already given some funding to through these sources. I actually feel a little bit uncomfortable with the idea that now, some of the way through, we're going to suddenly ask to do a different process. Like, to me, it seems more appropriate to start that at a fiscal year. Like, if we're already doling out some ARPA funds or funds from anywhere, I don't know. I don't know. I'm a little uncomfortable with the idea that we're going to change tactics. I understand that might be helpful, but it also, it seems a little bit random, even though it's an approach to try to make things less random.
And to be clear, it's been discussed throughout the ARPA conversation. There was nothing officially adopted, but it has been well known and reported that the council was discussing creating a plan and a process to evaluate and score proposals. But while we were having that discussion, there were at least 2 or 3 requests that were made, and it's pretty significant lobbying efforts to try to get those passed, and they were. But we have to start at some point, and I think it's adopted. Typically, we start things once it's adopted. It's adopted.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you, Councilman Bird. I hear you on that.
It was March 14th, Sarah. I'm looking at.
Of course, I've looked at everything but March 14th. So
page 44 of
yep.
5 or thereabouts.
And so, Councilmember Newsmode, you're on the Economic Development Committee.
Yes.
Did you use any of this kind of rubric when you, because you've taught your
we had a similar kind of rubric when we evaluated Aux and Northlight.
Right.
And as I recall our action from last Monday, our staff did run both Aux and ARPA through the approved rubric and showed the scores that had not come through committee, but at least they ran through the rubric with staff driving that process.
Okay.
Before granting approval, or
before
before
council approved it. Yeah.
Okay. And in that rubric, is there a cap on the percentage of funding that would come from the city?
Not an absolute.
Not a cap. It's just
a target.
It's a. Yeah. Those were both more in economic development sort of area, and they have some norms, and I'm looking for those 2 packets right now because we did actually include it. So there were
Looking
5
at something right here,
things.
page 41 of 5.
Can I ask one other thing about the rubric?
Sure.
And then if you guys don't want to talk about it now, we can do it at another
Yeah.
meeting. But I would be curious to know, I do think the point that Sarah made is really important. The sense that not all projects have equal access to funding. It is true that SRO projects are really hard to fund. No one wants to do them. And so, and maybe this is a different conversation, but I think it's important to think about what sources are realistically available when considering where the city can and can't step in on any individual project, because some things are much easier to fund in housing and some things are much less easy to fund.
And I probably shouldn't have started with that because I don't want to make it seem like there are many different areas that we would look at, and that's just one of them. I probably shouldn't have started off that one, but and that's why I wanted to see if Sarah could pull it up or anybody could pull it up. But
I have it right here, Sarah.
Yeah, I can pull it up, but I was trying to look for what we passed, the actual ones that were used in the 2 other, for the aux as well, because the whole rubric is quite
Quite wordy.
It's quite wordy,
flexible.
and there are a lot of different parts to it. Okay, now I have too many different things open because I have.
And I think as Chair said, we can. It's probably something we can share it out. Between as well.
And staff would be happy to create a draft version for housing. And that's something I actually think is very important for us to discuss at this, because even our housing projects aren't always going to be, or programs aren't going to really fit the same things. So what we will do is we will get the rubric, but it does have things that are very important in it, which is things like the community benefit, community support, the finances. Is it transformative? I mean, is it doing something that and can it be sustained? Those are also things that we had in some of the commitment in the rubric. The full rubric that was attached had so many things in it because there could be a lot of different factors that come into different.
Well, and it might be a question
programs.
for the Y or for whoever. I understand, Sarah, that you said you had concerns about using CDBG because of Davis-Bacon. Davis-Bacon. Anyways, my only familiarity with that is how it affects the type of people you can hire on a project, and the cost sometimes goes up. I don't know if there's other things, but if a project feels like they have the capacity, I mean, who feels like they have the capacity to increase the cost of doing their project, but it might also be worth a conversation with whoever is applying for the money on whether or not they feel comfortable assuming some of the responsibilities under Davis-Bacon.
Yeah. Ugo, you've been waiting patiently.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. No worries. Your questions are very good, Lauren. I have a question, and it's to Sarah. We have, you have mentioned somewhere here in our documentation for this meeting tonight that the NSP2 leftovers, if for a lack of a better term, is going to be reallocated. And when that reallocation happens, would that go into something similar to ARPA funds, CDBG, or what would be the guidelines for the use of that money? Can that be something that we can incorporate to the purpose of housing funding on a more unencumbered way?
It can be used for housing. In fact, that's what we're recommending that it be reallocated to. It is being turned into CDBG funding. And that is how HUD closes these out. The NSP program was designed based on CDBG, and it has many of the same regulations. One of the reasons, well, I won't get into what we're recommending, how we recommend we're reallocating that right now. We'll get to that later, but it would have the same issues as CDBG. What I do want to point out is that CDBG is not something that we normally fund very large capital projects with, because we have a lot of things we already do with CDBG, many of which it's difficult to find other sources for, things like alley paving in low-income neighborhoods, and just a lot of different things. Our housing has always been focused on rehab because there are very rare occasions where you can actually construct new housing with CDBG. But for the most part, we've used it for small-scale rehab. We haven't used it for major facilities. What we've used it for is deferred maintenance on public facilities, and the Y has over the year gotten some CDBG. We used it, we provided CDBG to help renovate elevators, for example, both of them. We also have put some, but very limited money, and not very recently, into the residence facility. At one point, we replaced all the lighting in the hallways, because I got to tell you, I was up there. It needed new lighting and new carpet, but it was more cosmetic than really transformative. Although we did improve the energy efficiency because it was new lighting, but we could even look at CDBG as a potential layering with ARPA, but CDBG is not a source of really major funding. So the question is, do we just overcomplicate things by putting in multiple sources and putting multiple regulations in, and not really solve a problem, or really, but I will certainly look at that. Maybe we can consider, whether that would be, and I can certainly give more specifics about what the challenges are to using each one. For example, you have to do a much more complex, you don't have to do an environmental review with ARPA of the type we always have to do with CDBG. Now, that isn't necessarily the end of the world, but it's extra paperwork, it's extra time in this case for city staff, and we're not overly long on staff either right now. So but I can certainly put together a comparison with any other things that make it more challenging. It would fit either because it's serving the appropriate populations.
So Councilmember Burns, you still have your hand up. Do you have?
I do, yeah. And just to respond to Sarah, what you just said, I think it would be helpful just for us to truly educate us, to learn more. You have such a wealth of knowledge, and you can go in great detail about things that most of us have no clue about. But I think the more we know, we won't know as much as you do, but the more we know, I think the easier it is for us as committee members to partner in trying to problem solve around these different challenges that we come up with as a committee. So I do think having that breakdown would be an education for all of us, and we appreciate you putting that together. The total project was it 12 million? Did I hear that correctly? The total
12.6.
Is it 12.6?
Yes,
So this is
12.6.
This is about. I mean, it's about 25%. So I found I just pulled up the plan, project feasibility. So just to point people to this, so we're all on the same page. This was city council meeting on March 14th. It was a special order of business, SP1. And so as soon as you pull up the agenda on the website, you'll see SP1. Just click on the link, and then you're going to go down to page blah, 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 blah. Looks like this is page.
I got 41 out of 585.
Okay, what I'm looking at looks like it's page 18, but you'll see it on this packet. Basically, it's public health, negative economic. I'm sorry, hold on, that was not the criteria. Project feasibility, team organization and capacity, budget, return on investment, addresses inequities and inequality, and then community support. And then for each of those 6 criteria, there's a description that gives some good information and then examples. So under budget, it says, under description, it says realistic estimates with diverse sources of funds, with majority of funding from non-city sources. And then under example, it says sources of funds less than 25% city funding, realistic estimates based on current market conditions, best practices. So this sounds like it's a little bit above, 25%. So again, I don't think this proposal would, I think this wouldn't make or break it, is my point that I'm getting at. I think it's right around what we're looking for. But I would encourage the YMCA team to look over this, and I'm sure Sarah will send it to you. And then I think from here, this is generic enough, and I think we intended it to be that way so that each committee could add things to this. But what we have here really can apply to every committee of the city, and it was designed that way, I believe. So I just wanted to run that by everybody.
Sarah, I'm wondering if it might be helpful to share as an example, either the Aux or Northlight.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And they were on the
11th, actually the last page of the April 11th packet.
Yep. Hang on. What I tend to do is I pull it up by the, I'll just do it by the packet, because usually I pull it up by the agenda and then I go on the individual click through, and then we all have different pages. So we're all looking at different. So
Councilmember Newsma, in the examples you mentioned, are those situations where those projects also may or may not be able to access various types of funding that kind of comparable projects could access?
Both of those projects had a diverse range of funding. Their capital stack was varied. One of the projects had debt, the other one didn't.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I can pull this up for you. Hang on, I'll share my screen. Okay. Let's see if I can get the right one here. And then can you tell me if you can actually see it?
You just have to zoom in, please. Yeah.
See, but not read.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
You can see a blur. How helpful, huh? Hang on. I'm enlarging.
I think you need to go to like 200%.
Yeah, I'm getting there, but then I have to get it back on the page too. So what you can see here is the project feasibility.
There you go.
Okay, there we go.
And one of the things that when we first started talking to the Y said, it's got to be way more than your project budget for the construction. We have to have an operating budget, and how are you going to support this programming in your facility, team and organizational capacity, information there, budget, realistic estimates with diverse sources. And yes, the example that was used was very much, I think, from Paul and I went through so many different models of things, was one that has been used at times by the Economic Development Committee. Return on investment. The return on investment is strong on the social side and provides much needed people of color. This is because this was a basically almost like a incubator, so it's going to be different. But when you look at the return on investment in the number of housing units and that sort of stuff is where we would put that. And then addresses inequities and inequality. And one of the things I believe we have in the packet, some of the demographics of our Y men's residents. And if you look at the racial and ethnic mix, currently it's 49% Black African-American, 43% white, 5% other, 2% Asian, and 1% Native Americans. One of the things we'll ask for is just adding Hispanic in the future, because what we are going to ask everyone who is tracking things for ARPA is to use the federal ethnicity being Spanish, not being a race. And community support is
I will point out
one of the last ones.
In this context, return on investment definitely includes financial return, but is by no means limited to
Right.
financial
Absolutely.
return. We're talking about social return on investment. So basically, community benefits of the project would factor into that category.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we have talked about is, and one of the purposes of ARPA is to improve the health and wellness of our lowest income and generally least fortunate residents. And the combination of housing with wraparound services certainly addresses that. So we will absolutely put together a draft rubric for the with the staff's input for the committee to consider, and we'll do that moving forward on things. I guess.
And Sarah, you'll give the folks at the McGaw YMCA a chance to comment on how you're putting together the information in the rubric.
Of course, we've had a very collaborative
sure.
process on this whole thing.
I'm sure you have, right? Yeah.
So, and actually, this rubric was put together by Paul, and I don't believe the actual participants had any weighing in. But we also, when we do these, when Paul and I have done them, we go back and we dig through the all of the input from the community and various other things that we've heard. So, we're not just completely pulling it out of our memories, which is at this point you can get kind of foggy on stuff that we did back in 2020. So, but
yeah. Well, I think we've had a pretty thorough discussion, and we're obviously going to be coming back to this, I guess, at our next meeting. I haven't said much yet. I do want to say that I think I was really so impressed to read about. I hadn't been aware of the case management wraparound services that that are now being provided to the residents, and I mean that's just such a meaningful addition to the longstanding program that you've had for over a century, I guess. So, and the the success that you've already had in moving some of your residents into permanent housing, I think that's just very exciting. And when I look at the plans for the renovated building, it's really the design is really going to provide some really important dignity and just some characteristics to the living arrangement that I think is really much needed and really so important, I think, for the residents. So I'm very excited about the project. I'm confident that we're going to get to the right answer with some more discussion. What I would ask Sarah is, what I did is I looked at the ARPA document to see what other programs have been kind of slotted into that bucket of, and so I was wondering if you could come up with even just a rough idea of, how much money we should be saving for some of these other, programs or initiatives that you've sort of thought about for that bucket. And because what they're all going to be, I think, very worthy, and it'd be, I think, helpful if we had a picture of the broader landscape in that regard.
I will certainly do that. One of the things that I did not look at for this, again, is our home funding. Because, again, home is very focused on standalone housing units and has extremely restrictive affordability, what affordability you can have. And I think one of the things, we talked about this a lot too, because the Y has a lot more change, especially with their new programming, which is not to make it people's last place they're living, but to move them on. We're not going to be having people necessarily who are staying multiple years to the same extent that you do in more traditional home funded housing. And the flexibility that we have, and I do want to note that without any operating subsidies. The Y is committing to all of the units being under 80% of area median, but with a significant number of them, the largest percentage below 50 and even down to 30% of area median. And that is not something we get even in our subsidized housing that we develop unless we get project-based rent assistance. You know, in other words, the Anne Rainey Apartments, for example, of the 60 units, 30 of them have project-based support, which makes them able to fund those lowest income residents. So it's quite a different critter, and clearly there's more of that I have in my head and drilled the Y on, but didn't get into the memo and stuff like that. So we'll be happy to try to explain some more of those things as well.
Great, okay. Well, then I think I want to say thank you to our guests from the McGaw YMCA, and thank you very much for being with us this evening. And Sarah will be in touch, and we'll look forward to continuing the conversation, I think, at our meeting next month.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again for having us
Okay.
and for the conversation, and know that this is our mission. You know,
Sure.
This is our work. And for as long as the city of Evanston needs us to be in this business, we plan on being in this business. And whatever we need to do to gain the support and to continue to tell our story, we're here to do that. So Sarah, thank you for all your help thus far and just continuing to walk us through this process, and the other various committees for allowing us to get to this point, for approving our project and allowing us to get to this point. So have a good night.
Okay.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Night.
All right, so our next item is the tenant-based rental assistance program, renewal funding for that program. So could someone make a motion to approve up to $200,000 for a new cohort of families to join the tenant-based rental?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay. So do we have oh, here we go. We have some folks ready to give us a presentation, or Sarah, do you want to say a few words first, or?
I'm having Anna say a few words first.
Oh, okay.
And she's
Anna.
got a couple slides, I think, too. So
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So I will go over the memorandum, and then we have a few remarks by Jennifer Crystal. And then staff from Connections from the Homeless will be available to answer questions.
Okay.
Okay. So staff is recommending approval by the committee of up to $200,000 of renewal of funding for a new cohort of families in the tenant-based rental assistance program. And this is administered by Connections for the Homeless. We're looking to fund this from the Home Investment Program Partnerships program, and the city has a total of $179,925.29 in available uncommitted home entitlement funds. And this funding will be increased to the $200,000 pending our 2022 home grant. And we expect home grant amounts by entitlement communities. They're expected to be released by mid-May of this year. And as you know, the 2022 Federal Consolidated Appropriations Act included an increase to the home allocation from the 2021 amount. So that's very good news. The TBRA program provides stable housing and support services for a total of 24 months to very low income and at-risk families with children under 18 in Evanston schools. And this is to break the cycle of poverty and also provide housing stability by developing their capacity to earn a living wage. So in the past, the city has allocated $160,000 to the program in 2020 and $300,000 to the program back in 2019. And for the period of January 1st, 2021 to March 1st of 2022, Connections has served 17 Evanston families, including 18 adults and 51 children. And they've helped residents achieve housing sustainability, employment, educational goals, and income increases even during the pandemic. A few points of their outcomes is that 92% of families who graduated from the program moved to a permanent home that they can sustain. 88% of families started new jobs or maintained their jobs. And 100% of the 51 children in the program have advanced onto the next grade level. So it's just remarkable that a stable housing is giving children the ability to study, and they all passed on to the next grade level. And 41% of families served maintain or increase their income while in the program. And some secured a new job or they received training for a new field. No additional families can be enrolled in TBRA unless more funds are allocated. And if the city allocates the $200,000 for the TBRA program, it would allow Connections to provide 2 more years of rental subsidies to an additional 8 to 9 families, even with the rising housing costs. So that is the memorandum. And we have Jen for Crystal. She's the Director of Housing Programs at Connections for the Homeless, and she will give a few remarks.
Okay, great.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jen Foyer-Crystal. It's good to see everyone's faces, and thank you for having us tonight, considering our proposal. We also are here with Liz Novak and Jalissa Flores-Singh and Janique Smith, who I hope now is a panelist as well. And I'll, if there's any questions, we'll make sure the question gets to the right person. But I just wanted to simply say thank you so much for this funding. It's always been a very vital program to keeping our neighbors in District 65 and 202 in District 65 and 202, not moving out, being able to sustain housing here and stabilize with their families. And this funding has been especially vital during the pandemic. We were able to extend the last grant we got about a year and a half ago. We were able to extend the families that were in during the beginning of the pandemic into a 3rd year. And 5 of the families did take the extension. There were 2 that moved on to other opportunities. And then this will give a chance for us to finish out other families that we've added during this year and then add more families on. So this is really important funding during these tough times when people have had to be unemployed at points and have when their kids were out of school. And so we've just really appreciated this funding, and I know the families have as well. And as our outcomes show, even through the pandemic, we've done pretty well with helping families stabilize and stay in permanent housing after the pandemic. So we're happy to take any questions, anything you want to know more about the program.
Okay, so committee members, comments or questions?
Sounds good to me. I'm ready to go.
Yeah. No, it's such a valuable program, and I just makes such a huge difference for those families. Councilmember Burns.
Yeah, thank you, Jen, for being here. And I think I heard Betty earlier, if I'm not mistaken. And who else is on the call? I see Sue, I see Nia, and I'm not sure if Adina is, that name sounds familiar, but I don't know if she's with Connections, but hello to the Connections family. So how many, the last, I don't know if we're calling this a grant, but the last funding the city approved for this purpose, how much was that again?
It was $160,000.
160, okay. And again, I apologize, I was not able to prepare for this meeting as much as I would like full transparency. So maybe ask some questions that are in the packet, but I'll be very quick. And then how many families were you able to support, and what was the average funding amount?
So the 160,000 was specifically for the extension of the families that were in the grant during when COVID started to make sure they got a third year. So we were actually able to keep 5 of those families in. And then we actually added.
How many were in the program before that you were able to support?
There were 7 that were in. I'm so sorry. My child has not been down here for the first hour and a half. So when the pandemic started and we were still in the former grant, we had 7 families in, and we offered all of them extensions for another year because of the pandemic. And 5 of them accepted the extension. The other 2 had kind of moved on and were doing okay. And then we added 4 more families with this fund as well. So we actually extended these funds even further than they were expected to go. So we're always kind of checking our spend down and seeing it and adding as many families as we can. We use every penny of the funding every time. And the spending amounts.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No,
I was just saying the spending amounts vary per family. Sometimes we have families that are making, they're working full time, they're not in school, and they're able to contribute a lot more towards the rent. And then we have other families where we're paying a large portion of rent for a while they're in school, which we also support in this program. Sorry, Alderman Burns, that I interrupted.
No. And I would imagine the need is greater than the need or the demand is greater than the money you have to run the program.
Mm-hmm.
And just to piggyback up, sorry, Councilmember Burns, to piggyback off what Jen was just saying in terms of need, and I think we included this in the application we submitted to the city, that we've got an eligibility list that's over 30 families right now who we're always sort of screening families in to figure out who's got kids in districts 202 and 65, and then keep them on that wait list so that when funding does open up, we've got a queue of families ready to go. Also knowing that often that this doesn't come open frequently. And so we're trying to connect families to other resources in the interim. But right now the need far exceeds what we've got in terms of available funds.
Well, I'm just trying to do some quick math. Okay. Sarah, have we thought about, and I know we didn't want to do a whole lot of this, but I think since we already have an existing program that it might be the exception, but have we thought about supporting this program with ARPA funds?
We have not looked at supporting it through ARPA. And part of that is because we could use ARPA and do a big bump in the number of families that we could put in for at least a period of time, but we wouldn't be able to sustain it. And there's a certain question of how much we can bump the program size, because that also affects connections. They have a very, and they've been very flexible in expanding to meet needs, but there's a point where we could not necessarily achieve sustainable long-term goals that we have no other source for. So it's a balancing act. Could we use it for ARPA? Yes. I mean, could we use ARPA for rent assistance programs or programs like this? Yes, technically we could, but we haven't brought forward that as a use.
And I asked because I know where we've used funds for I can't remember what we call it. I think we call it guaranteed income, for the guaranteed income program. And while we have new requests, new proposals and requests, I think we also should look to support the city programs that have worked. And I think the way to narrow it is, again, we know the program exists. They have 30 families that are on the waiting list. What does it look like to clear out that waiting list, at least for at least to provide them real assistance for 1 month, 2 months, however the program works. I mean, back of the napkin estimate, that might be around 600,000 to do that. Back of the napkin, I might be off, but it seems like a dollar amount that is worth doing because it's an existing program. It's narrow enough to where if people say, well, why can't you support me? Or it's like, look, it's an existing program. It works. We have people in queue for it already, and we just want to make sure that we can take care of all those people who likely have went on the waiting list during the pandemic, which I think is exactly the type of use that ARPA was intended to be spent on, is like, harm and financial hardship created because of the pandemic. So that might be the best list to work off of if we're trying to make a direct impact on those who were mostly people who were greatly impacted by COVID. So I think that'd be something to consider.
Yeah. So Councilmember Burns, Betty Bogg has got her hand up, and she might also want to address the infrastructure, the connections infrastructure to support a seriously expanded program. Anyway.
Sure.
Thank you, Councilmember Ravel, it's like how we run our programs. In fact, our case manager for the TIBA program, Janique Smith, is here with us tonight. And just so you all have some context, this is a very successful program. And one of the reasons is we provide intensive case management for that program. No city funds go to pay for that intensive case management. We actually are leveraging funds in from the state and federal sources to bring into the community to provide those services. And what we feel cautious about, and Councilmember Burns, I love your enthusiasm for this program because I feel it too. What we want to be cautious about is our ability to, we can't just staff up and then 2 years from now, like staff back down. That's not fair to our staff. We don't want to lure people away for some kind of like short-term gig, from their other paying work. And that's not to say that we can't entertain some degree of expansion, but when the city pays only for rental and utility assistance, which is what they do in these cases, we have to bring other resources in to match those funds, and we're just stretched. So I just want to be transparent about our ability to support that level of expansion if the city doesn't, toss anything in for the staffing, and to make sure that it's sustainable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just to add on to that, we also, families, even the 24 months for some families is not enough. We push to have these great outcomes, but for families that have been through trauma or had a life event that's really been disheartening for them, and the 24 months is what we need, and sometimes even more. So, but I think Alderman Burns, like yours is right in line with what we do with prevention. So we make sure nobody falls through the cracks when in those situations, either when they just need a month or two of support, and we're making sure to gear them to the right program. So this one we see for people that are employable and self-sufficient, but do need that longer term subsidy. So it's like a great fit for the work we do in this program.
So
but thank you so much.
I would love to have more conversations about how this program could work in expansion. Councilmember Burns, I love like that sort of entrepreneurial thinking that you're bringing to this. It's really important, and you're absolutely right. The equity that is that goes unaddressed when we have folks on waiting list is profound. And I don't want to sound reticent. I just want to be planful and thoughtful and make sure that we're doing the right thing by everybody in the community.
No, that makes sense. And if you can reflect, if there is a scenario where the program can be expanded in a way that wouldn't require additional staff, and I would like to know what that looks like.
I'd love to get back to 300,000 for a contract instead of 2. That would be amazing.
Right. If I could just add something.
Sarah, go ahead.
One of the things is home can only be used for housing, the housing expense. It cannot be used for services. So that's how that's been structured.
Mm-hmm.
ARPA does not have that limitation. So what I'm happy to do is work with Connections and look at what might be a program expansion that we could consider through ARPA I'd also like to see what our home grant actually comes in at, because we may be able to allocate more money from that if we get an increase. We have right now our expected home amount split between bricks and sticks, which means we expect we'll put something into new housing development or some, and then TBRA. That's pretty much how we have it allocated in our draft action plan. But of course, that can be amended and changed if we decide we want to use the money differently because of the different needs and the different ways that they can be used, because ARPA does have far more flexibility than home, that's for sure. So all of those things are possible. I think that what I'd like to do is continue on the path with getting something that's a sure thing considered and hopefully approved, and then we can go on and expand and look at ways and talk with Connections on how many more families they might be able to reasonably accommodate without getting what Betty was talking about, which is you staff up and then there's a crash. Because as much as we might like COVID, all the economic woes and the people's job woes to go away, it's not going to be immediate, we know. And we've worked very hard to try to keep from having families left without resources, which is why in many cases, we have one or two families that get an extension, but not all of them. And so, we'd be happy to work on that with Connections and just come back at some point, with, later in the year with how that might be done. I think what's important is we do have families that are going to be coming to the end of their most recent money. And so we want to be able to make sure that we have money ready to keep anybody from falling out of the TBRA program who really needs additional support.
And I just wanted to in my comments that I definitely support approving this tonight. However, I don't think later in the year is sufficient. We're either going to do it or not. But there are people on the waiting list. They're not there. It's not a lotto ticket, right? They're not like, yeah, my life is going the way it needs to, and if I could, if I can score with this lotto ticket, this would be great, right? Like they're saying we don't. In many cases, I would imagine if it's similar to people that are coming to that are calling me and talking to me, that I don't know how I'm going to pay rent next month or the month after, and I'm looking for a rental assistance program to help. And so I just want to make sure, again, we're looking at this as if it's just people on the list, but even to tell you, I know somebody specifically that reached out whose family member was a victim in an incident here in Evanston, was in the hospital, and his situation is he has to be by our bedside, so he could no longer work, and he doesn't know how he's going to pay rent. So he has to choose between being by his child's bedside to support the child or going back to work, right? And so, yeah, of course, you would want 6 months if you can get it, but even a month, even 2 months can make all the difference in these situations. And so I don't think later this year is sufficient. Certainly if Connections doesn't feel like it can expand the program in any way that would make ARPA funds useful, that's one thing. But if there's a way to help those families, again, I think that is squarely what ARPA is meant to do. And it may not, for that group, it may not matter later in the year, right? Their crisis is happening now. So I just want to be sensitive.
There is still some short-term assistance that the cities has given Connections to work with, that is rent assistance with the CDBG-CV funding that hasn't been exhausted yet too. So it's not that there's nothing. I think what I'm concerned about is to expand the TBRA program. There's a staffing ratio of I don't know what it is. I'm sure Jen or somebody could, or Jonique knows it, but of the number of cases that the case managers can handle, because it is intensive case management. this is one of the reasons we don't fund as much as we thought we might through the Social Services Core Committee, because in this case, Connections is providing that for those families and we're providing the housing. But we're not saying there are no resources for people who and people can get some short-term subsidies, but I do think that we have to really
Councilmember
kind of consider
Burns,
this.
like the story that you're describing that you shared with me as well, is one of the things that makes the work that we do so difficult, because we are constantly having to tell people that there aren't enough resources to make them okay. Like it is very grueling work that we do. One of the things that's, I think, a big advantage to the city working with Evanston is that we do have so many programs that when someone isn't a good fit for one program, we're able to try to slot them in somewhere. But you're absolutely right. There is not enough rental assistance in the long and short term. We have completely gone through all of our emergency rental assistance money. We ran out of that, provided by ARPA, provided by the state. We ran out of that in January, and we're turning people away all the time. So we need rental assistance in every possible configuration to help these households who really, they will be evicted. They will end up in our shelter system. It's extraordinarily expensive to help them there, even though that's less expensive than having them end up on the street. But we need to do more, and we can do more.
But Sarah, there is other funding at the city that Councilmember Burns, for example, could get his resident connected with
we do have we have rent assistance through CDBG-CV that can fund up to 6 months.
Okay.
It has to have a tie to COVID, which might make it not work, but it might. And so I think that there are other potential sources,
And I want to underscore potential, because what I'm hearing from the community members, and it's not just one person. I gave you one example, but there are many. Is what more in line with what Betty said, that a lot of the funding is running out. So again, it's important that we recognize that the community is very aware when they're put on a waiting list, because they're put on a waiting list, and all of that gets back to me. So it's we can discuss this on committees and leave here and act as though money's out there that's not, or money's out there that is hard to qualify for, but it will get back to me, because they know that they're going to run into it. They're going to apply, and they will be told they're not eligible, and then they get upset because I sent them there. So I want to be very careful here that if there is an opportunity here to expand the program in a way that can be accommodated by the current staffing levels at Connections, I would like to do that. And whether it's 2 people, whether it's 5, I think it will make all the difference for those households.
I would just like a little clarity as to whether or not you're talking about the TBRA type program, which is, as I say, a longer subsidy.
I'm just saying,
or
that
if you're talking about rent assistance of shorter terms too.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think I trust you, Sarah, and Connections to come back with something that makes sense. But I guess just what I want to underscore is, we have ARPA money, obviously, that is a lot more flexible in the way I understand it than some of our other funds. We have existing programming. We're approving one, funds for one tonight. And I just want to see if we can, add a few more dollars to what we're already doing to make a greater impact. And I'm just saying it should be sooner than later, because the emergencies are happening now. The reason why I reiterated this point is because you mentioned later on in the year, and I don't know exactly what that looks like, but the 30 people who are on the list, even if we can help 5, I think they need the help now. And yeah, there'll always be another 5, but still, I think this is an urgent matter, and it makes all the difference when somebody has that bridge assistance, whether it's 1 or 2 months, or certainly they would want longer if we could provide it. But whatever progress we can make using ARPA funds, I think we should at the very least explore it, is all I'm saying.
We do have additional capacity for some additional rental assistance if that is available in the form of TBRA without having to like up staff. Janique loves helping some TBRA families. And so we could absorb, like I said, we were operating at a $300,000 level a couple of years ago. We can absolutely manage that again.
Yeah, and part of the reasons we were using more TBRA was we had a lack of fundable projects. We weren't doing bricks and sticks projects in some years at all. We tended to do that in large lumps, but we'll work with Connections and really look at whether it's a TBRA type thing, which is a longer commitment, or that and a balance of some shorter term as well. And come back with the recommendation. I don't know that, I don't know that we can do that for the next meeting. We have a bunch of other things on the, I mean, there's a certain amount of capacity for people to actually put together these things and bring them to the committee. And we've got some other things on the agenda, but we will get to work on it.
Okay, so for tonight, then we have before us the motion to approve up to 200,000 for the renewal funding for the TBRA program, and the idea is that Sarah and staff and Connections will come back to us with an idea for possible additional funding to help more people who are on the waiting list or in need of rental assistance. But so for tonight, though, we're voting on the $200,000 for the TBRA renewal. So could we have a roll call on that, please?
Sure. We need a motion and
it
was moved up front.
We did have a motion.
Yeah. Chair Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Newsmode.
Aye.
Lauren Berlin. I think you're muted.
Aye, sorry, aye.
Hugo Rodriguez.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to everybody from Connections, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you
And
all so much. We really appreciate you.
Yeah,
and we will get this to City Council on the first meeting we can upcoming, which will be the first one in May, May 9th, I think it will be.
Okay, great. Okay, well, thank you. And to be continued, obviously.
Yes.
All right, our next item, I need someone to make a motion to transfer the remaining unobligated program income from the NSP2 grant in the amount of $145,591.50 to the city's CDBG program as directed by HUD. Could someone?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is this something, it's a bookkeeping?
It's a bookkeeping. At one point, they were saying you can hold on to your NSP program income and use it as NSP. And then they were like, we have all these huge grants. We've got these grants out there. We want to close them out. And so for those of us who are entitlement communities and have CDBG, they are closing it out by moving it to CDBG program income. Now, there are some things that I'm just finding out because I put in the memo. We didn't know if we were going to amend the 2021 action plan or the 2022 action plan. And when I asked HUD what we were supposed to do, they said, didn't think about that, because our 2022 action plan is in draft form and will be in draft form till we get our 2022 funding amount, and then we make those tweaks. So that's kind of premature and might get bollocksed up in their paperwork. So they are now recommending, I just got this email today at 12:58, that we will amend our 2021 action plan. So this is sort of like when we got the CARES Act funding, we amended our last approved action plan. So it's following that same pattern. And we have to, this does require a 30-day public comment period and a substantial amendment. So what staff is just asking is approval for the transfer. We will develop the, and actually to the recommendation that it be used for the housing rehab program. We will write that up as a substantial amendment. It will do its 30-day public comment, and then we will have a closing of the public comment period, as we always do for these things, before it goes to council for approval. What HUD would like to do, what HUD will do is they will make the transfer regardless, and then we actually have longer time to work on I just have to give them what a draft amendment is and how we plan to use the funds, and we can then change it if we have other considerations. They just have to have something in hand when I submit this lovely form requesting the transfer.
Okay.
So this is a largely administrative and frankly, one of those lovely things we have to deal with.
So we can just go ahead and vote on the motion as made.
That would be wonderful.
Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Chair Ravel,
Aye.
Councilmember Newsma,
Aye.
Lauren Berlin,
Aye.
Hugo Rodriguez,
Aye.
Councilmember Reed,
Aye.
and Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you. And I know Lauren needs to leave just a couple
Yeah,
more
I
minutes.
mean, I can jump on. I just have to deal with my kids for a few minutes and then I can come back.
Well, we have one more thing that needs a vote.
Okay, I'll stay on a few minutes. That's fine. That's fine.
I hope it will be fast. So would someone make a motion? Staff is recommending a minor amendment to our rules and procedures to clarify language around the requirements for motions. Would someone make that motion to approve that change?
I will make the motion, Madam Chair.
And a second.
Second.
Okay. So did everybody get a chance to read that clarifying language? Does anybody have any questions? Are we ready?
Yeah, I have one. I'm sorry to jump in there. I have one quick question. So did this committee adopt rules previously, or what rules are we amending?
Yes. We did.
Okay, I distinctly, I thought I remembered one of the committees that Sarah is staff for adopting rules, and I suspect it might have been this committee.
Yes,
so, thank you.
It was.
Yeah, right.
And I can give a very quick update as far as what this amendment is. We're not changing the spirit of the rules or anything like that. It's just, it was brought to our attention that the original intent wasn't extremely clear. And so we worked with legal to make sure that the rules were actually reflecting what we were hoping to happen, which is what was happening in the past as well, meaning not require motion for every single item and making sure that the meeting is running smoothly. So there's no actual change. It's just a clarification in language to make sure the intention is clear.
And of course, everything that has a vote to it always has to have a motion and all that stuff. But if it's just a discussion thing, it was just to kind of return a little bit to the sort of less formal feeling that has been used by this committee's bearers for many years.
Great. Okay. So I think we're ready for a roll call on this amendment to make this clarification in our rules.
Chair Ravel,
Aye.
Councilmember Newsma,
Aye.
Lauren Berlin,
Aye.
Hugo Rodriguez,
Aye.
Councilmember Reed,
Aye.
and Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
Okay, thank you. So the last bit of our agenda is just a staff update about some of our task forces and committees. So Lauren, if you do need to take care of a child.
Yeah, okay.
We understand.
The chaos sounds like it stopped.
Oh, okay.
Try to stay on.
I'm about to turn into a pumpkin too.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So,
For the same reason.
So Sarah, is there anything super substantive that you need to tell us here?
I'm just going to have Marion give you a real quick
Oh,
update.
Marion, okay.
Yes, and can you guys, can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I'm gonna try to run through this very quickly.
Okay.
It's late. We have 3 updates around our different task force and projects. The one-stop shop retrofit, we are happy to share that we received $500,000 of congressional earmark that have been secured for low-income solar. So we're considering with Kara how to potentially include that money into this program. And there's an additional $2 million that's been applied for through the offices of Representative Jen Tchaikovsky and Senator Duckworth. We got our first meeting with Elevate and CNT to review their proposal and how we could move forward. That's including budgeting as well. We're supposed to get a second draft, and we're targeting next month's meeting to see if we'll ideally be ready for request for funding on this.
And that's ARPA funding.
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
And so what's our target ARPA number?
Well, we're looking at the $1 million range for this program as the launching and pilot.
And that the low-income solar is going to be part of this, wrapped into?
No, that would be in addition to that. That would be added on, and we would also try to leverage.
No, I'm not talking about the funding, but the management of that $500,000 low-income solar grant will be part of the one-stop shop.
We have to find that out. Kara just got an email from EPA about the grant, more information on the grant. Really all we know so far is we got $500,000. So we're just starting to find that out. We'll piece it together hopefully by the 17th and have some real information for you on that.
Thanks.
Okay.
Anna, do you want to take the small landlord task force update?
Sure. So the small landlord task force met for the first time on April 4th. To discuss a small landlord assistance program. And the goal is to provide financial assistance to small landlords as a business that were affected by the COVID-19 pandemic and the related economic downturn. The next task force meeting will be April 27th, and we will be discussing the program outline, and we will be working to define what a small landlord is.
So, okay, Councilmember Burns, you have a hand up.
Yeah, I actually had a quick question on the last section we just covered. What's the total budget, Sarah, for the retro?
Well, we had estimated, that was what we'd said when we were talking about it with the council. Our estimated budget was around $1 million for that.
Oh, so what's the two? So the 2 million is on top of that. I'm just trying to understand.
Yes.
It says additional 2 million. Oh,
Right.
Okay. So I was saying the total budget, not including the city's contribution, but just what's the goal for that program if you were to add up all the funding we got from any source at any level of government? Do we have that yet, or we're just trying to get as much as we can?
We're really trying to get the pilot off the ground. One of the things we need to figure out is if we can pull in weatherization and other funds as part of the, one of the goals of the One Stop is to give people access to multiple programs more easily, but we're taking a step beyond that and saying we want to do some really significant retrofits of individual properties to really, that is a much deeper rehab and retrofit than a lot of the other programs that are out there. Are things like kind of like getting the ComEd packets of, weather stripping and stuff like that. So it's really small scale and getting more people into the idea. We really want to do much larger retrofits, and our goal is to really test out what it's going to take to do those in different sizes of properties, so that we can get a better handle on how much we would need total and go after more money from other sources.
I'd like to not dwell on this tonight, but I'd like to make sure we're thinking about workforce development here as well.
Yes, we are.
Folks to do that work.
Absolutely.
Okay, next.
So the last update is around the landlords tenant services survey. The task force met a few times and we had made some really good progress as far as getting an agreement and a plan together around how to structure the surveys and how to put them in place, starting with one short survey right after initial contact and a more general satisfaction survey 4 to 6 weeks post the initial contact. Unfortunately, once we started working around even just a simple short survey, which I was expecting to be an easy implementation, we've run into some complicated implementation. It's a very, very manual process. There's no way to get any kind of contact information to be able to even dump in a third-party survey software or anything like that. So it's really one email at a time into one survey at a time, sending it extremely manual. We've talked with the teams to see if there was any potential for improvement. They're actually working on RFP for a different tool, which is great news. The only thing is that new tool needs to be selected and then implemented before we can even get to our kind of higher level implementation, meaning a survey, which would be not their first priority. So right now where we're at is kind of at a standstill. We don't have the manpower to be able to run the survey in that very manual process. The satisfaction survey may be a potential option. It's also going to run into the same technology issue, and it's going to require a lot more coordination with other teams and other departments because it's a much bigger ask and needs a little bit more planning than just a one question survey about timeliness. So that's where we're at with the landlord-tenant services survey for now, at least.
Okay, thanks. So Councilmember Burns, you have your hand still up?
Yeah, I had something to say about the last one. I'm a little off. The last one was, I just wanted to understand the date of the next meeting again. When is the next?
The next
landlord?
Landlord tenant, I'm sorry.
The landlord tenant can work.
The small landlord committee, you mean?
Yeah, small landlord, I'm sorry, yeah.
April 27th.
27th.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
27. Okay. And I know you're gonna have this discussion at the next meeting, but I've mentioned this before that I really think either being very careful with what the small landlord definition is, or expanding this to support small to mid-sized landlords, and we can. I've heard, what was it? Somebody used the other day, a vulnerability, something can be used, or what was that, Councilman Reed, where we heard that it's some vulnerability index, I think can potentially be used, or other, different other expressions or whatever of hardship or proof of hardship. But I really think it's important we expand it. I mentioned this in some of our previous calls, that I know there are programs that that people who are legitimate, like billionaires and millionaires off of low-income rental housing, are eligible for, just because they have as many affordable units as they do, and those organizations who support them are trying to make an impact, and they can make a great impact supporting these landlords who are legitimate millionaires and billionaires. So there's low interest loans and other programs that they're eligible for that small to mid-sized landlords are not. And so I don't want to quickly, rule out mid-sized landlords or larger, smaller landlords so quickly. I think we need to be very thoughtful about how we go about that. So I'll add that as a note, and I have the date, so April 27th, so I can share that out with the community.
Well,
this
is a working group. This is not a
working group. I'm sorry.
This is not a general meeting for everyone, and I think we have to keep it to that, because again, if we start
by Sarah, share it out, Sarah. I mean, there were landlords who thought the first meeting was going to include landlords, then I think at that first meeting, it was determined that we were going to do a survey instead of including landlord. I had been telling landlords that they were going to be included in the working group, that they would be included in the meetings. I didn't know you were going to, there was going to be a survey instead. And so that's what I mean is the landlords want to keep track of when the working group is meeting and when the survey will be released, et cetera. So that's what I mean. I wanted to share this information with them, not to join, but just to be aware of when things are happening. But also another question is, and this landlord asked me this, is the plan to share the survey out through mail or just through email? Has the working group considered that at all?
We're considering all options right now. Okay. Most likely it will be through SurveyMonkey. But we have also considered doing a mailing for more targeted landlords or for people that might not have access to a computer or SurveyMonkey. So both options are on the table.
Yeah, I would say, especially for this survey, because we have, rental registration, I think it makes a lot of sense to mail it out so we can make sure we get the, as much participation as possible. And we have, we know where they live, at least for the landlords that are registered. So I think that's hopefully is something that we're able to do. And then the survey, last point on the survey, I'm in communication with Luke Stowe. I think this is something that should be a priority for them as the different departments evaluate different software. And I know they're in the later stages of that RFP process, which complicates things, but I think it concerns me that we may miss an opportunity because we don't want to add something late in the game. And I think we need to add this. This is important because it's where the community comes in, ties into a lot of these decisions. And so I am talking to Luke Stowe. I'll be talking to City Manager Gandersky tomorrow about it. Again, I think it's important that this is a priority and that we select the final softwares for each department based on their ability to survey the community. So I'll, that's an advocacy, obviously, as an elected official, I'm able to do. I don't expect staff to do that, but I just wanted to give you an update and we'll see what happens.
And I just want to share that as part of our conversation with 311, that was something that I shared as well. There's only so much that we can do, but I did mention that that would be an ask from our team and maybe from other to have this kind of functionality.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Alrighty. Well, thank you, staff, for this update about, you are all so busy. This is, it's really good. I mean, there's obviously a lot to do and you are on it. So with that, I'm just going to mention that our next committee meeting is May 17th and we have gotten through our agenda. So I am going to call us adjourned. So good night, everybody. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.